Welcome to the Bulwark podcast. I'm Charlie Sykes. We are up against the 100-day mark for the Biden administration. And of course, later tonight, the president will give his first major speech to a sort of joint session of Congress, one of these socially distanced things where he's going to unveil another big spending plan. We can talk about that. But there's so much going on, including it's sort of one of those, choose your crazy day. And well, at least that's what I was hoping to do with Amanda Carpenter this morning, our colleague who joins me on today's podcast. So good morning, Amanda.
Hey, Charlie.
All right. So choose your crazy. Where do we start in this target-rich environment?
Well, I want to be optimistic about things. And I think there is a silver lining to all the crazy that's happening. It is getting nutty, but it's dumber than ever. It is dumber than ever. The fake meat stories, the fake Kamala Harris books being handed out. I'm not threatened by these stories.
Okay, so this is the good news. The good news is it's crazy, but at least it's dumb.
Okay. Yeah, it's not scary and crazy. I'll take dumb and crazy any day.
No, that's fair. By the way, did you see that latest development on the Kamala Harris handing out the books to the people at the border? It turns out there was one book that was donated. The reporter who wrote the story has resigned from the New York Post. Okay, and she tweeted out, "The Kamala Harris story, an incorrect story I was ordered to write, in which I failed to push back hard enough against, was my breaking point." So
yeah.
Unpack the ethics of all of this. So I knew it was bogus. I didn't object. I got busted on it. So now I'm taking a stand on principle. Is that unfair? Am I being hard? I'm a hard ass on this.
Yeah, be hard. If I recall correctly, this isn't exactly the first time this has happened with the New York Post. Wasn't this some of the funny business with some of the Hunter Biden stories?
Yeah.
That they didn't have a byline with a reporter who would actually stand by it. And so, wah, reporter, I'm glad you wised up now when they came to you to put a fake story on your byline. But I would have been running out of there maybe last year.
Well, it was interesting, how deeply Fox News got into that whole the whole burger story and the whole fake book story. But I guess that is the good news. I'm going to circle back on that. See, I was thinking that in terms of choosing your crazy. This morning, I wake up and I see that Joe Rogan is telling people not to get vaccinated. And your old buddy, Jim DeMint, is saying, Joe Rogan is absolutely right. By the way, when I say your old buddy, there's always quote marks on it. I need to
see, this is why I had to be optimistic up front because I knew this was coming. Yeah, I used to work for Jim. I loved working for Jim DeMint.
See, this is crazy and it's dumb, but it might be deadly. So,
no, it's bad. This is bad. And, it's just, I don't know where they're going with this. And so when I saw that, this combined with a number of other people on the right at Fox News, radio, other places who are taking a stance against vaccinations, or if they want to be maybe more clever about it, just saying, well, maybe you don't need to do this. Maybe you're special, male 21-year-old. Maybe you don't need to get it. And I used to think that the anti-vax thing was a crazy, fringy idea that you would sort of see pop up on the left and the right with our Robert Kennedy Jr., Jenny McCarthy. But now here's Jim DeMint echoing Joe Rogan, telling 21-year-old people they don't really need to do it.
So, but let's talk this anti-vax stuff. You're right. You used to be Berkeley lefties who would object to vaccines, but this has become like a thing on the right. Is it a way of sort of signaling, objections to what's going on? I mean, just tribal loyalty. Is it part of the long-running anti-science, anti-expertise strain that we're increasingly getting on the right, or what? It's just, or is it just attention getting?
I mean, I get that people would have reservations about government mandated vaccines and people should look into it. They should talk to their doctor about it. I mean, I certainly did when my kids, they're combining vaccines and just asking, what is this? What's the spacing? Because I want to know what's going into my kid's body. That is fine. I remember having conversations on Capitol Hill when they were talking about mandating the Gardasil vaccine for girls
Yeah.
to prevent cancer. And, I have reservations about that because it's like, okay, I don't know if my daughter, I think I would know if my daughter's sexually active or not. I'd rather that be my choice to have that talk with her at that age, blah, blah, blah. I think a healthy amount of curiosity in questioning about the science is well and good. But this stuff with COVID, when it's a deadly disease, it's tested. And this just feels like it is reflexively anti-liberal, and that I'm just going to be contrarian against whatever the Biden administration, the media, and the establishment is saying.
Okay.
This isn't a thoughtful critique. And the well for this is just so deep. I think people can just jump in it and not worry about how low they're going to go.
Okay, but it's not a straight line. I mean, everything you said is absolutely true here. But what's bizarre about it is that you could also have made the case that the vaccine was one of Donald Trump's most successful legacies of his presidency, right? And he's actually said to take the vaccine. I mean, look, I'm not defending Donald Trump, but you could certainly imagine a counter narrative that would say, yes, the vaccines are out there, and we're going to call it the Trump vaccine, because it was the Trump vaccine that we got out of Operation Warp Speed and yada, 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 yada. It's like there's a complete disconnect there, isn't there?
Yeah, and I think if they wanted, the Trump people had a line that they could have pursued if they actually would have admitted that coronavirus was real. But I don't think they could come to the grips with the fact that Donald Trump actually was responsible for letting it come to our shores and spreading around. That just kind of just fried their brains out. So after that, nothing good could come of it. But the path that he pursued is actually, I think, kind of in step with the American ethos. And I'm not endorsing everything he did, but in the fact that as Americans, we generally pursue large technological solutions to our big problems instead of taking easy day-to-day mitigation efforts. Meaning, I think there were probably smart people in the administration that said, just let this thing take its course and we're going to double down on the vaccine. What happens, happens, and we're just going to get the shots out and that'll take care of it next year.
Okay, speaking of day-to-day mitigation techniques, I do not want to pile on. I have really mixed feelings. I don't want to pile on the CDC, but they come up with this new guideline for people who are fully vaccinated wearing masks outside, and so they came up with a chart of when you cannot wear a mask. It seems, however, they're still saying that vaccinated people wear masks in crowded outdoor settings and a variety of other things. I guess part of this is, shouldn't the message be get vaccinated and get your life back?
Yep.
It seems that they are slow walking this, and they're not connecting with people in the real world. I mean, look, I think that every person that I've talked to that is fully vaccinated, it's not a political decision. They're going, hey, I'm getting my life back. When I go outside and there's air blowing around and it's getting warm, I'm not going to wear a mask. Now, I suppose if you went to a rave outside or something like that, but it does seem that they're slow walking it, and that they're underplaying this, the strongest argument you could make. Your life can return and you can do amazing things if you get the vaccine. And instead we get the CDC saying, no, you can't really do that. You can't really do that. And it's like, it's not going to be that big a deal for you. Like, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, it feels very technocratic, baby steps. We don't want to overpromise. This is the point where you can, Joe Biden do the good old blue collar Joe, look the Americans in the face and say, use your gosh dang sense. If you get the vaccine, you're vaccinated, you get your life back. If you're not, if you're in a crowded area, 6 feet or less from people, you should wear your mask. But schools are opening and we're going to be back this summer. Do that.
Yeah. Okay, that seems reasonable. We'll spend a lot of time talking about the president's speech. I want to shift gears. The president is giving this big speech tonight, and he's unveiling another $1.8 trillion plan. I mean, this is,
it's getting ridiculous.
Well, $1 trillion here, $1 trillion there, it adds up to real money at a certain point. So the plan, tonight that he's going to unveil is, supposedly will expand access to education, safety net programs for families, $400 billion for the child tax credit, $225 billion to improve child care, $225 billion for national paid family and medical leave program, $200 billion for free universal preschool, $200 billion to reduce Obamacare premiums, $109 billion for free community college, $85 billion to boost Pell Grants, $45 billion for childhood and school nutrition programs. Look, this is big. This is a really big thing. So I have a question to ask you, Amanda. You add this together with the other plans, and back of the envelope, he's either proposed or signed $6 trillion in new spending. I mean, by any measure, this is one of the largest expansions of the federal government since New Deal / Great Society. So here's my provocative question. Where's the Tea Party now? Where's the grassroots push against all of this spending? Why aren't we seeing rallies and demonstrations and, people with the tri-cornered hat now, given all of this? Because instead, we're getting a lot of the stuff about the Dr. Seuss and the bogus meat story and the Kamala Harris book story and, some, rhetoric about socialism. But where's the Tea Party?
There is none. Donald Trump killed it. It's over. Nobody cares anymore. Nobody cares. I think this speaks to the larger leadership vacuum that we are facing. I don't want to say post-Trump Republican Party, maybe just post-Trump White House. He's kind of like the Golden Hermit King who's just crawling around his palace down there in Florida, and maybe he'll change his shell and come up to New Jersey sometime. But with his silence and his sheltering in place, I do think he's freezing the larger Republican field, not just in terms of 2024 presidential candidates, but just in terms of direction. I don't think people know what to do. Listen, Donald Trump was not a policymaker. The problem with serving a mad king is that you never know what he's going to say next or when he's going to whack you. And so if somebody wants to make a critique of Biden spending money here or there, what's not to say that Donald Trump says something different and it cuts the needs out from underneath them? And so I really think this is why we're talking about Dr. Seuss, because those are safe topics.
No, when you say that they killed it, is it because of all of his spending and his deficits? I mean, so how do you draw the straight line between people who are deeply, deeply concerned about the debt and deficit with the Tea Party and then still call themselves members of the Tea Party? I mean, there are people who still have the brand, right? I mean, Tea Party Express and everything, who then morphed into complete acolytes for Donald Trump, who had no problem with adding how many trillions of dollars did they add to the debt? I mean,
that's exactly what happened. I mean, if you look at the Tea Party leaders, the Jenny Beth Martins, the Amy Kramers, they became, women for Trump, sponsoring the riot rally. That's exactly what happened. They decided that having power was more important than policy or principles. It's a very seamless transition for people like them.
Okay, so what was the Tea Party actually all about? Okay, now the reason I'm asking this is because, when you raise this question, we're going to have a lot of people who are yelling at yelling at us right now, saying it was all about race. It was all about the fact that Obama was a black president. And obviously, that argument seems more plausible with time. But I remember there were people who were sincerely concerned or said they were about this. And I think, you remember the Tea Party. You kind of have to break it down because it was all things to all people in a certain way there. There was a genuine grassroots, sincere part of that movement. But then there were the grifters, there were the professional outrage entrepreneurs, and there were the complete hypocrites. And so it's hard to sort of disaggregate what the hell it actually was. I remember at the time, about a year and a half, I was initially impressed with it. And then after a while I was going, what the hell is going on here? All of these people calling themselves the Tea Party. It's like they all sort of glommed onto it and decided that they were going to, they were going to have this mantle around their shoulders. And I wasn't quite clear where they were going, what they believed, what the agenda was. But I think if you want to get a sense of what was going on the right, the way in which the grifters and the entrepreneurs and just the complete hypocrites took over that movement, that was a pretty good, indication of where this party was going, even pre-Trump.
Yeah. I'm just sort of thinking as you're talking about watching Obama deliver his State of the Union addresses and talking about his expansions when it comes to Obamacare and the various other things that he was proposing that really pale into comparison to what Joe Biden is going to say tonight.
No,
and there's no grassroots opposition to it whatsoever. And that it really is a stunning thing. I mean, listen, Charlie, $6.1 trillion. Why doesn't Biden do 10 trillion? Why not? He has a
Well, why
free
not?
pass apparently to do whatever he wants right now, because the only kind of policy I see critiques I see from the right when it comes to the Biden administration is, where is Kamala and why isn't she down at the border?
Or,
Like,
or,
okay. They should just laugh at that and add $10 trillion more. I mean,
or,
I'm not saying that
or
because I
yeah.
want them to, but I'm just being spiteful.
No, I mean, you close your eyes and put your finger on any one of these items, whether it's the $200 billion, the $250 billion, whatever. If Barack Obama had proposed any one of those items, the conservative movement would have been hair on fire. This would have been a call to arms. And as it is, what happens? He's going to give this speech, and the passion you mentioned a couple things, but the real, what the real passion on the right is right now is still continuing to stop the steal, the whole relitigating the big lie, election integrity. Every Republican everywhere is running on that. Now, of course, they throw out the argument that this is all socialism and everything. But one thing that strikes me is that it doesn't seem to. Well, maybe it is resonating. It resonated, in 2020 in some of the congressional races, but the country has moved to the left on this, and most of these items, which are incredibly expensive, and I have no idea how we're actually going to pay for them, but they're popular. And it creates a problem, doesn't it? When you see things like the Monmouth poll that shows that 2/3 of Americans support these massive spending plans, that's a challenge for Republicans who have been basically recycling the same lines about debts and deficit for a generation, and now are kind of like, okay, we did the same thing, and public's really not with us on this stuff anymore.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings on a lot of that. I think if you ask people, would you like to spend $10 million on bridges and roads, they would say yes. But then go back and ask them in 3 years if that spending made a difference in their community or not. Because a lot of these programs get proposed and the money doesn't have a visible presence in a lot of these communities. And so I'm just like, we'll see about that. Everybody says it's popular. Everybody wants to spend the money. But get back to me in a few years if people feel that it made a tangible difference in their life. But the flip side of this, all the where is the Republican Party stuff, they're in retreat. I mean, I think we just have to look at where it is that they're in retreat. They got their butts kicked. They don't know what to do. They're in the wilderness right now. I mean, the hottest thing happening is this Arizona audit, which is just going to be another Q documentary probably in 6 months. And another element of this that is worth consideration is I think it is very difficult for Donald Trump, which we do have to recognize him as the symbolic leader of the Republican Party. The 2024 nomination is there for the taking. Why isn't he making a critique of Joe Biden? And I think it has to do with the fact that he hasn't come to terms with losing to Joe Biden. How do you critique a guy who voters chose over you? For Donald Trump's personality, I think that's just something that short wires the brain. I don't think you can get there. And that's what this Arizona audit is all about. Why is he hammering Governor Ducey so hard? Because he needs a figment of a win to redeem himself to the public, to show his face on television again. I think he's looking for that small sliver of a victory so that he can come back, because he needs it. And until he gets something to do that, don't expect to see him.
So this is where you have this kind of paradox where he still has this iron grip on the Republican Party, but he is relatively quiet. He's not providing any intellectual leadership. So there is kind of a leadership void at the moment. And so when we talk about, why do we talk about Tucker Carlson? Why is he, taking such a prominent role? It's because there's kind of a void there, isn't there?
Yeah. Roger Ailes, gone. Rush Limbaugh, gone. Donald Trump, gone. Oh, look, there's Tucker being clipped on Twitter every night at 9:00.
Yeah.
He's the new character. And that's what he is. I mean, he's really reducing himself to a character. And I'm conflicted about the amount of attention that people should give him, because it is important, because he does speak to an important Republican base. But at the same time, he's gone so far out there on the vaccination stuff, on the white nationalist populism stuff. I think he's really putting himself into a corner that he's not going to be able to get out of.
Okay, so
And then there's the Wicked Witch laugh. The Wicked Witch.
Which I still find sort of endlessly fascinating because it's so weird. But okay, so yesterday you had an outstanding piece in the Bulwark about the new populism because so the Republicans are trying to figure out what they're going to do. There seems to be a tremendous attraction by some of the folks who are the most ambitious, like Josh Hawley and Marco Rubio, for what you call punitive populism, and suggest that this may be the future of the Republican Party. That some of these folks think that this is the new formula. So tell me about punitive populism.
Yeah, the biggest question through the Trump years and people forecasting beyond it was who is going to be able to translate Trumpism into something meaningful. And my gosh, a lot of people tried. I mean, how often did we hear about the economic anxiety? And this kind of led to the rise of J.D. Vance and these other people that would try to put some kind of defensible framework around what he was doing. And at some point, somebody is going to come up with something. And that's when I was watching all these proposals come out after the Georgia voting law to start punishing corporations who spoke out against it. Delta Airlines, Coca-Cola, Major League Baseball. And you really saw Republicans, and not just the people who are out there. We're talking Mitch McConnell, who is the elected leader of the Republican Party right now, the most powerful Republican in Washington, saying, yeah, there'll be consequences for corporations who speak out against our priorities, not just on the elections law, but in everything from Second Amendment to environmentalism. He had a whole list of things that he was willing to take punitive action against corporations, against if they exercise their constitutional right to political speech in a way that hurt him potentially in an election. And so I think there's something here, because it is, if you're going to go down the path of this nationalist populism thing, it's not free market. It's not a traditional chamber of commerce, free market, free trade economic theory. It's, we're going to hurt people who hurt us. We're going to overthrow them. I mean, that's what populism is about, right? When you get down to it. And Josh Hawley has been on this for quite some time, and he's been focused predominantly on big tech, Amazon, which he just wants to smash up because they don't sell all the books he wants. They're selling his book, but they're not selling all the books he wants.
Okay, by the way, can we just stop right there because this is so delicious. I just need to put a little bit of a box around this that Josh Hawley is putting out a book attacking big tech, and he has a tweet, that we're going after big tech. Buy my book on Amazon.com. That's just too good. I mean, I'm sorry that irony is already dead, because I think irony would have enjoyed that he's pushing out Amazon.com. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, please. The thing that's so interesting to me about it is I think Josh Hawley pioneered the space with trying to go after big tech. And by that, he means Amazon and Facebook, which there's problems with Facebook. We can talk about the algorithms, but he really just wants to smash it up because they don't share his values. And that is something new. And Marco Rubio has been echoing this. The only reason I would read a New York Post op-ed is if Marco Rubio wrote something stupid in it, which needs to be mocked, which he did this week, in saying that he wants to start going after people because they don't share his, quote, working class values. Well, what are those?
What are those? I mean, do they actually have to do with anything about populism, economics, improving opportunity, or is this all culture war?
It's all culture war, but it's such a grab bag. Some of the things that he lists about why Amazon should be punished is because they didn't sell a book on transgender theory. Amazon uses the Southern Poverty Law Center for selecting which charities you can donate to through his Amazon Smile program, and because Amazon does business in China.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's pretty subjective, but okay, that's what we're doing now. You don't comply to my values, you get this. You get the fist.
I still have a and clearly this gives them their chance to, put a populist veneer going up again. I mean, going up against, big business, which of course is going to appeal to many of their supporters. There was always that cognitive dissonance of, with all the populist rhetoric, what was one of the major accomplishments of Republicans under Trump was giving this big, wet, sloppy kiss to corporate America. So, I mean, there was always that gap, and now they're going after them. So here's my question, though, is how deep does this run? This is still the Republican Party. Mitch McConnell still runs the Republican Party in the Senate. None of them are actually going to vote to raise corporate income taxes. I mean, I understand the rhetoric and the posturing and all of that going on, but is Josh Hawley really the intellectual policy future of the Republican Party?
That's a good question. I think what he's doing is interesting. He has put the most thought into going down this route. If you're asking me if this is a viable intellectual policy framework for the future of the Republican Party, I would say no, but we haven't had one for the last 4 years, so I'm not even sure that matters.
Yeah, I've mentioned this for a couple of times, but it does seem to contribute to the political climate we're in right now, where the Democrats they're planning to increase corporate taxes, increase taxes on capital gains, increase taxes on income of people more than 400,000. And again, that used to be a bright line for Republicans, but it's hard now for Republicans to defend low corporate taxes at the same time they are waging this anti-corporate campaign. It does seem to have created a political window for Joe Biden and the Democrats, doesn't it? Because, I mean, I remember a few years ago, every Republican in America would be saying they are raising the taxes on the job creators, American corporations, or, what is creating all of this prosperity. And now, at the same time they're demonizing them, it becomes harder to argue why they shouldn't pay a little bit more in taxes, right?
I guess this is the problem. We keep trying to fit a policy debate on top of what they're doing when it's all culture war.
Right.
If the Republican Party is just choosing to be reflexively anti-liberal, that's it. It doesn't have to be consistent on corporate taxes, because the idea now is that it's us versus them. This is the kind of nationalist populism that I think is working for them right now. And if you're looking at the midterms, you don't have to win that many more seats. And if you just want to be reflexively anti-liberal, take a pass on fighting all these policy fights and say, it doesn't really matter what we feel about corporations. We're just going to smash up Amazon and big tech and MLB and anybody who doesn't share our values. Well, that's the game right now.
So there's a really asymmetry between the two parties here in terms of their approach to this. But the Democrats are coming up with one policy proposal after another, while the Republicans continue to be almost completely devoid of actual positive policy issues. So we may disagree or be concerned about the cost, but they are talking about, the child tax credit, child care workers, paid leave, infrastructure programs, broadband. Whereas this beating heart of the Republican Party seems to be like playing a completely different game. I mean, it's like watching one team. One team is playing professional football, and the other team is off here doing something else. I'm my analogy.
It's exactly right. It's policy war versus a cultural war. Some people are having an academic debate inside, and outside they're playing dodgeball.
Yeah, very good. Okay,
right?
So could I talk about Liz Cheney for just a moment?
Please.
Okay, so
I didn't know I was going to love her so much.
Okay, God, well, my newsletter today is kind of a love note. It's Liz Cheney's profile in Courage, and she is doing something very different from a lot of other Republicans, obviously. Okay, I meant to say that in not such a Captain Obvious way, but I started off my newsletter by saying, you know why Kevin McCarthy doesn't want to be seen with Liz Cheney these days, because the contrast would be too obvious. So here you have a Republican Party that's always talking about we are manly, we are strong, we fight. When the reality is, no, they're not. They are cowering, and they are weak, and they cave. And the one person that stands up and says, no, I'm going to fight, even if it costs me everything, is Liz Cheney. And so she is a Republican unicorn. She is and the contrast between the castrati running the Republican Party is pretty, interesting, coming from the highest ranking woman. But she's standing there. She is a solidly conservative person. She makes no pretense that she's a Biden Republican. She's not a squish. She's not a rhino. She is hardcore conservative. She's a member of leadership, and she is just not bending an inch on her critique of Donald Trump. And it is driving Republicans crazy. So, I mean, there's two things here. I mean, is that she is extremely vulnerable here. She represents a state overwhelmingly run by Donald Trump. I mean, on paper, it looks like she's committing political suicide. And yet, unlike almost everyone else, she's not moving left. She's not showing up on MSNBC or CNN, is she? She's
No.
just doing her thing. And I have to say, in terms of political courage, we talk a lot about it, but it is vanishingly rare. And you want an example? That woman right now. And it's driving Kevin McCarthy and Donald Trump out of their freaking minds.
Yeah, I love the profile that Robert Draper wrote, Liz versus MAGA.
Yeah.
And what was interesting about that, and he was recounting the leadership meeting where they were voting to strip her from her position. And there was Republicans jeering her, saying it looked like she was their girlfriend who's cheering for the other team. And I appreciated in that piece that there were obviously Republican women in that room who spoke to Robert Draper, telling what happened in that meeting because they objected to it. And then I saw that Kevin McCarthy was asked yesterday whether she should still have a position in leadership. And his answer was, well, that's a question for the conference. And I looked at that and I said, well, that's been asked and answered. You did have that vote. That did happen. She called all you fools on the carpet and said, let's have a vote. And she won that vote. And so the conference has spoken. And Kevin McCarthy can't state that obvious fact because he's still scared of the guys who don't support her, including in those guys, Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And so no wonder he doesn't want to stand next to her. No wonder. Because she already ate his lunch and drank his milkshake.
Well, and remember, it was McCarthy who supported her. He actually supported her back then, but he's pressed for his personal opinion. I'm reading from Politico now. McCarthy told a room full of reporters that, quote, if you're sitting here at a retreat that's focused on policy, focused on the future of making America next century, and you're talking about something else, you're not being productive. So he seems to be, wanting to distance himself. Like, you would think that these guys at some point would just have some pride. Just come on, don't embarrass yourself with time and time again. And so that's it. She just stands there and goes, you know what? We can't forget January 6th. What happened on January 6th is a threat to democracy. We cannot put our heads in the sand. And she, her ramrod straight position is such a dramatic contrast to the quote unquote men in the room. I understand why Kevin McCarthy does not want to stand next to her anymore. I mean, it is embarrassing. Speaking of
the fact that he told some reporter that she should tone it down, that was the message, that she needs to tone it down. Go tell that to Marjorie Taylor. Go tell that to Matt Gaetz when he was going to her district to be a little troll and try to get people to show up to yell at her so she'd have to spend a couple more $1,000s on personal security. You go tell those people to go tone it down. Go down to Mar-a-Lago and tell Donald Trump, don't tone it down. Stay quiet. Stay quiet and stay out of the way. How about that?
Well, exactly. Well, and one of the most embarrassing things that I've read in some time is watching McCarthy over the weekend try to revise the history of his position on January 6th, where he had this sort of moment of conscience, this moment of insight, this moment of independence, and he got over it really, really quickly. But the fact that he's embarrassed about one of his better moments when he actually called out Trump after the riot because he was there, he knows what happened. Now he's trying to back off. Oh, we didn't really try to overturn the election. Bullshit. You signed on to that Texas lawsuit, which would have overturned the election. You know what Donald Trump did. You know what the conversation was. And yet, he apparently thinks that this kind of absolute spinelessness, and that's not as strong a word as I actually want to use here, is what it's going to take to get him in the speaker position. I mean, it used to be that actual leadership, that if you wanted to be in a position of power, you showed leadership. Now the incentive structure is that the weaker and the more disingenuous and cowardly you are, the better it is for your career, at least in the current Republican Party.
You know who I want to see Kevin McCarthy sit down and have a little chat with on camera so I can watch?
Who?
Police officer Michael Fanone.
Oh, I'm glad you brought this up. Okay, so speaking of which, so one of the things that is upsetting Republicans is that Liz Cheney keeps going back saying we cannot move on from January 6th. We need to take it seriously. We can't pretend it didn't happen. And at the same time, we get that interview on CNN. And by the way, thank you for giving us all at the Bulwark a heads up when that was actually happening, because it really is a must listen. There's people need to go. If you haven't seen it, this is the police officer who was he was almost killed. And his speaking out. Here's the headline in the Washington Post: DC officer who suffered heart attack on January 6th calls out Trump for downplaying brutal, savage riot. And he says it's been very difficult seeing elected officials and other individuals kind of whitewash the events of that day or downplay what happened. Some of the terminology that was used, like hugs and kisses and very fine people, is very different from what I experienced and what my coworkers experienced on the 6th. So this appeared on CNN tonight, last night. Don Lemon talking with Officer Fanone. Let's play this where he talks about how the demonstrators were not offering to, were not hugging and kissing him. They were trying to kill him. Let's play it.
The former president has said, and I know that you don't want to make this political, but it said, those were good people. They loved their country. They were basically ushered into the Capitol. They walked into the Capitol, and that it wasn't a big deal, that they're patriots. What did you experience that day, and what do you think of that rhetoric?
I think it's dangerous. It is very much not the experience that I had on the 6th. I experienced a group of individuals that were trying to kill me to accomplish, their goal. And I think that sorry, Don. Man, I didn't think I'd get this emotional. I experienced the most brutal, savage, hand-to-hand combat of my entire life, let alone my policing career, which spans almost 2 decades. It was nothing that I had ever thought would be a part of my law enforcement career, and nor was I prepared to experience.
Wow. So, Amanda, you've written a book about gaslighting, but how does Kevin McCarthy and Ron Johnson and others look at that and listen to that and continue to behave the way they are or say the things they've been saying?
They're not looking at it. No. They're not listening to it. They've shoved it out of their minds, and they've told themselves that it wasn't a big deal. There's a festive atmosphere there that day, Charlie. These were nice people. They were having a picnic. That's why there has to be accountability when it comes to January 6th. There has to be accountability. Yes, there was the impeachment trial for Donald Trump, but what about all these other guys? What about them? Just listening to that interview is hard. Watching it, he's your prototype cop guy, good looking, beard, in shape. And watching him just kind of lose it rips your heart out and punches you in the stomach. He does not deserve that. None of those men and women who went there to protect the Capitol that day deserve to be treated like this. They deserve some respect. And you think that the people who they're charged with protecting their lives, you think they would do them the courtesy of looking at what happened so it wouldn't happen again. And maybe saying the guy that fomented this riot shouldn't be in charge of the Republican Party ever again. How hard is that? But yeah, it's, the Michael Fanone story. So he's a DC cop. It wasn't like he was just there that day. He had a heart attack. He had a concussion. He was shocked with a stun gun and beaten by these people. I mean, when he's talking about it was violent and it was brutal, it's because he experienced firsthand. He got beat. He was the guy that you probably saw in other clips where the people are saying, take his gun and use it against him. He thought he was going to die that day. And we're very lucky that he didn't. And I cannot believe that we still have elected Republicans walking around who dare to show their face in public, who act like it didn't happen. It blows my mind.
It ought to blow people's mind. I mean, that's the thing about gaslighting, which is to make you think that, well, you define gaslighting. Since you wrote the book about it, I'm not going to tell you what gaslighting is.
Yeah, I mean, I thought gaslighting is pretty bad. I mean, gaslighting has caused people to believe in an alternate reality that they have constructed, and that has definitely happened here. And I always feared that Donald Trump would use the powers of government to gaslight people for his political ends, but never. Nobody could have predicted that he would have gaslit America with a big election lie that would cause people to storm the Capitol in hopes of overturning President Biden's election and, causing all kinds of pain and damage in the process. This is short of an actual civil war. It doesn't get any worse, does it?
So this is what...
Well, you get a pandemic. I guess we got a pandemic as a bonus.
Which also, by the way, wasn't the reality check that was going to shake people loose. Those are the two things. You would think that 570,000 Americans dying and the attack on the Capitol would be that moment where people would step back and go, whoa, okay, we need to reevaluate everything. We need to rethink everything. And you and I have experienced that in different levels way before this, but the fact that it hasn't is amazing. But that brings us back to Liz Cheney, because, for her, this was the breaking point. And so when she said that she was going to vote to impeach Trump, this is her statement. Remember what she said? The president of the United States summoned this mob, assembled the mob, and lit the flame of this attack. Everything that followed was his doing. None of this would have happened without the president. The president could have immediately and forcefully intervened to stop the violence. He did not. There has never been a greater betrayal by a president of the United States of his office and his oath to the Constitution, which is an amazing statement. But right now, as we're sitting here, it is far more likely that the Republican Party will exile her than Marjorie Taylor Greene.
And this is what's breaking. Yeah, I mean, these are the things that are breaking the party apart. I mean, it goes back to Liz Cheney. It actually goes back to the beginning of our conversation for me with Jim DeMint, and even by extension to Ted Cruz. Both people, senators, I worked for and enjoyed working for and loved working for. I love my time on Capitol Hill. But the breaking point for me when it comes to, speaking out against them had to do with coronavirus, which killed people, and the insurrection, which almost killed our democracy. Both Ted Cruz and Jim DeMint have been on the wrong sides of those two issues. And those are party-breaking issues. Those are Republican issues. Those are issues that are destroying the Republican Party, that Trump has broke the party with. And so I don't know how we're going to get put back together again if we don't resolve those two things.
Well, yeah, and they seize on these issues. I think that historians are going to look back at this period and find it extraordinary that masks became so politicized and then vaccines became so politicized. And one of the explanations will have to be that politicians like Jim DeMint and Ted Cruz seized on them because they were the wedge issues, because they were the signals of tribal loyalty. And so they chose them not in spite of the fact that they were divisive, but because they were divisive. So that's where we are. And I suppose that's the negative thing. Weren't you going to find the more positive? Weren't you looking for the silver lining when we started this conversation?
Can we talk about Joe Biden banning meat? Actually, could we have some fun? If people are going to be reflexively anti-Biden, what could he do that would be fun? Could he just come out and say, I love vanilla ice cream and this is why it's great, and then Marco Rubio would try to ban it somehow.
He's a meat-eating guy. That's the thing why this wasn't going to work with Joe Biden, because the guy likes barbecue.
What if Kamala Harris throws a barbecue at the border?
Oh. Well, he's going to ban menthol cigarettes. I did see that. So I suppose now supporting menthol cigarettes will become the big cause on the right.
They're going to have a smoke out somewhere. Okay, so they're going to smoke menthol cigarettes and probably give themselves a nice lung burn. Okay. I can't have fun with that one.
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure about that. You know,
didn't Donald Trump ban vaping, the flavored vapes, at some point?
For about 5 minutes until the vape lobby got to him, you know. And so I don't know. The thing about this event tonight is going to be really weird, isn't it? I mean, it's going to be a joint session of Congress, but they're doing the whole social distancing thing, which I understand why they're doing it. But you know, I was over the weekend, I mentioned this a couple times. I read Boehner's book, which I found entertaining, but sort of, you know, so we say light, calorie light. Do not recommend it, because at the end you go, that's it, really? I mean,
does he explain how he came around on selling marijuana? He doesn't really sell it.
Not really, but there's a lot on why he drinks red wine and golf. So if you want to read a lot about golf, you can read this book. But he does he does tell a story about how he's sitting next to, you know, at one point when he became speaker, he has to sit next to Joe Biden when Barack Obama was, you know, giving his speech, and what that's like when the president's giving his State of the Union address. And he says that he went to Biden beforehand. And he said, you know, could we like do something? These things have become like ridiculous, where you know, one side stands up and applauds and, you know, cheers all the time, and then the other side sits on its hands, and it becomes this sort of, you know, massive kabuki dance where, you know, the thing goes on forever because everybody has to stage this. So maybe could we like not do these standing ovations for every single thing? You agree? Could we do that? And Biden says, yeah, that's a good idea. And then of course the speech comes around, and Biden leans over to him sort of sheepishly and says, you know, I'm going to have to like stand up once in a while. I'm going to have to do this. So I don't know. But there will be one thing that will be interesting. Here's a first. The president of the United States will be giving this speech, and the two people sitting behind him will both be women. That's never happened before.
That's cool.
It is cool. So there's something.
They can take Kamala off the milk carton. They found her. She'll be there. She'll have a seat there. They can look at her.
Is she on the milk carton? I mean, do you feel that way?
Oh, did you see this? Oh, no. It was one of these stunts at some press conference. They put her name on like a milk carton. Where's Kamala? Why is she not at the border solving immigration?
Yeah, they are obsessed with her. I mean, this is one of the themes. You know, people keep saying, well, the Republicans haven't figured out how to attack Joe Biden. That's not true. They have some things. The border is a vulnerability, I think. By the way, people ought to check out today's Bulwark, because I think there's a sort of a line between a number of the stories, you know, connecting the dots. James Carville gave an interview to Vox where he urged Democrats to actually talk like they're real people as opposed to, you know.
Yeah, but he told Bill Kristol that first.
Right. He did tell him that. and he's saying the dangers of wokeness, you know, could you like use words that real people use? So that's good. And then Tim Miller has a piece of sort of advice to Democrats, you know, not to get sidetracked onto some of this other stuff, to actually figure out how to talk to working class folks about what you're doing, and to you know, maybe call the populist bluff of the Republicans. And Mona Charen has a very, very provocative piece where she points out that, you know, Biden's doing a good job with the unity, but he's got to be careful about some of the racialized rhetoric. And there's a lot of studies and polls that would suggest, you know, the ways to talk about some of these issues that are effective, and the ways that play into the right wing's hands. And I think that those are all pretty powerful reads. And again, I would put those in the category of constructive criticism. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. So I think all the Biden people should be reading all their stuff constantly.
Okay. So what else what else are you watching later this week?
The Republican. Well, I'm going to be curious for the Republican response tonight. Tim Scott will be delivering it. I saw some of the walk-up pieces saying that he is going to focus a lot on his personal story. I would expect him to talk something about police reform, since he's the lead Republican guy in the Senate. I'd like to hear him talk about the possibility of reaching a deal on qualified immunity. I think that would be great. I don't know. Also, can we just get a deal on releasing body cam footage for these events, whether at the U.S. Capitol or wherever, immediately, as long as the victim authorizes it? It seems like that would do a lot of good. One point on that Michael Fanone interview, he has body cam footage. He wants it out. He wants people to see it. With all of these things that keep happening, let's have the footage so we can have consensus on what happened immediately. That seems like a very obvious thing.
That seems like a very obvious
tape
thing.
you, that's your body. It's your intellectual property. I'm not a lawyer, but I would make that argument. You get it. And if you want to release it, you can. So anyway, that's what I'd like Tim Scott to talk about.
On Tim Scott, who had been kind of a Trump loyalist, although every once in a while he breaks with it. But he's being attacked rather viciously from folks on the right, including our good friend Tucker Carlson, for working with working on the issue of police reform and saying that we have work to do. For some reason, saying that this country has work to do on race police relations is apparently dangerous, at least in the views of some of the Fox News hosts. Raises the possibility, boy, you know what, if Joe Biden were to reach out and co-opt and say, hey, you know what, I like Tim Scott.
Tim Scott.
No, thank you. That's not
Cotton. Yeah, all these guys.
That is not a hard name to say either. I like his proposals. If you co-opted that, actually reached across the aisle on something like that, that would really throw the right into a tizzy. But it might give him a very significant bipartisan victory.
It would be great. It'd be the right thing to do. It would be wonderful. I worry that it would put Tim Scott in trouble, but it would be great.
Well, it would. And that's what's interesting is that Scott is already being vilified for even thinking of being part of the reformers, because any show of independence now among Republicans is dangerous. So it would be nice to have a little show of courage on both parties' part when it comes to this particular issue. Amanda Carpenter, thanks so much for coming back on the podcast today. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
And thank you all for listening to today's Bulwark podcast. By the way, a quick reminder that we will be having a Bulwark Plus live stream tomorrow night, Thursday night. We do it every Thursday night at 8 o'clock Eastern time. If you're a member of Bulwark Plus, you can tune in to hear our comments. And obviously, we're going to be talking about the 100 days, and we're going to be talking about the president's speech. Thank you all for listening to today's Bulwark podcast. We'll be back tomorrow, and we will do this all over again.